So our last snippet is going to look at the 2016 campaign, which is it's a very unexpected result with a Trump victory. Um, One of the weird things, and this is an election all of us can basically remember. One of the weird things about the 2016 race is that even though Trump led throughout the 2000 year of 2015, the expectation was that he would weaken very quickly. And indeed, when he loses the Iowa caucuses, everyone just sort of assumes, well, that's it for Trump. Um, but instead, he wins New Hampshire and he sweeps the South, running on what amounts to a right-wing populist campaign. Trump's big issues are an opposition to political correctness. This idea, he's going to speak the truth. Trade, more nationalist position on trade. Immigration, a more nationalist position on immigration, and intriguingly, foreign policy, where he argues for a more anti-interventionist policy, which generates surprising amounts of support in the Republican primaries. One thing that Trump's victory shows is that there really was quite a gap between what the Republican base wanted, and Trump was much closer to the Republican base, and what Republican office holders wanted, kind of an internationalist vision, maybe an aggressive policy towards the Middle East. And, Trump, in this sense, wins fair and square within the party. He represents, if not the clear majority of the party, clearly the largest faction within the party. And you can see it from this map. These are the early primaries and caucuses when the race remained viable, and there were multiple serious candidates and three big ones in Trump, Ted Cruz from Texas, and Marco Rubio from Florida. And you don't need to look too closely to see there are lots of red counties on this map, and in different parts of the country, in New England, in the Mid-Atlantic states, in the Deep South, in the Upper Midwest, even in the Rocky Mountain states as well. Ultimately, the race boils down to Trump and Ted Cruz, a good opponent for Trump, and that Cruz is more clearly conservative than Trump, and Cruz has such a grating personality that Trump's many personal foibles, don't hurt him as much. And Trump ultimately seals the deal by winning two primaries in quite different states. The first was in New York, where he just cleans up with John Kasich second and Cruz a distant third. As you can see here, Trump carries every single county in New York State except for Manhattan, which goes to Kasich. Trump's single best district in the primary and his single best district throughout the primary process, as long as the race remained competitive, was the Staten Island district, where he gets 80% of the vote. Well, Staten Island, Bay Ridge, Sheepshead Bay, this kind of working class Republican district these voters are the Trump base, people who in many ways are not super conservative on economic issues, but feel that the Republican elite just didn't speak their interest. Um, the race comes down by this point. Cruz is hanging on by a thread. It shifts to Indiana. Indiana is a state with a powerful social conservative base. The sense is that social conservatives are not going to vote for Trump for obvious reasons. But a week or so before the primary, in a surprise, the very socially conservative governor of Indiana, Mike Pence, says nice things about Trump. He had been widely expected to endorse Cruz. Trump takes the lead in the polls, but Trump is, shall we say, not terribly gracious in victory. Just before the primary, Trump sends out a tweet thread suggesting that perhaps Cruz's father had played a role in the Kennedy assassination. I mean, you really can't make this stuff up. Based on reporting in the National Enquirer, which was providing surreptitious support to Trump throughout the campaign. And in the end, Trump easily wins Indiana. These Christian conservatives vote not for Cruz, but for Trump, and Cruz drops out of the race the next day. Even so, Trump is perceived as unelectable. The general assumption is the Democrats will easily prevail. And if indeed Joe Biden had been the Democratic nominee in 2016, it's likely that Biden would have beaten Trump. But in Hillary Clinton, the Democrats nominate the perfect foe for Trump for a couple of reasons. First, Trump has serious ethics problems, but Hillary also has serious ethics problems, dating from her time in the Clinton White House. Trump has serious conflict of interest problems, with regards to his real estate empire, but so does Hillary. Here you had someone who had accepted huge speaking fees, $250,000 in some cases, to speak before various finance groups, business groups, and people ask, what's she doing here? And Trump has repeated gaffes that alienate key voting blocks, but so too does Hillary. And this is in a CNN town hall where she's kind of pandering to environmentalists. But note the closing section of this comment.
Example, I'm the only candidate which has a policy about how to bring economic opportunity using clean renewable energy as the key into coal country, because we're going to put a lot of coal miners and coal companies out of business. Right, Tim?
This was a shocking statement. It's quite true that Democrats don't like the coal industry, are worried about environmental problems associated with coal. But for a Democratic nominee to openly boast about putting workers out of jobs, this is not what happens. And it reflects the general problem that Hillary has in 2016. She struggles mightily to speak to white working class voters. There's this sense among these voters who she refers to in large numbers as deplorables later in 2016, and says there's just no way that she can win them, kind of a mirror image of Romney's 47% comment from 4 years before. These voters are a much more significant element of the overall electorate than the Clinton team seems to have realized. And they made, I think, one fundamental analytical flaw, which is that they assumed that if a white working class voter voted for Barack Obama, African-American man from Chicago, in 2008 and 2012, these people were loyal Democrats and they would vote for any Democratic nominee, and they would certainly vote for Hillary. It turned out that wasn't the case. A lot of Obama 08 and 2012 voters, especially in the Midwest, wind up voting for Trump in 2016, which is one of the key reasons why he wins. Hillary ultimately does seize the nomination, but it's a long, long slog. This is the final map from 2016 on a county base. The red counties were carried by Hillary. The green counties were carried by Bernie Sanders. The darker the county, the heavier the winning margin for the candidate. You should notice a couple of things from this map. The first, in the deep south, these very dark red counties, from Virginia through the Carolinas, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. These are overwhelmingly African-American counties. Black voters went overwhelmingly for Hillary. The reason Hillary gets the nomination is that Black voters remain loyal to her, essentially the same thing that happened with Biden this time around. Meanwhile, though, you see lots of strength from Sanders in New England, in the upper Midwest, in the Rocky Mountain states, in the Pacific West. Sanders's brand of socialism, gets support from surprising places. He wins the Oklahoma primary. He wins the West Virginia primary. One of the unanswered questions, to which we now know the answer, of the Sanders 2016 campaign was, were these voters really voting for Sanders's brand of socialism, or were they mostly just protest votes against Hillary because Sanders was the only candidate left? Some of these voters are clearly voting for Sanders's brand of socialism. Washington State, for instance, Sanders wins because it's a left-wing state and they like his policies. But Oklahoma voters and West Virginia voters are not voting for socialism. They're voting for Sanders because he's not Hillary and they want to cast a protest vote. And I think in 2020, the Sanders people mistakenly assumed that all of these Green voters are voters that they could count on in 2020. And of course, that turns out not to be the case. The Sanders campaign hurts Hillary in 2016 because it drags out the nominating process forever. What ultimately kills Hillary in the fall campaign are two things. The first is that there were significant demographic changes that were occurring, especially in the Midwest. So this map here shows the shift in party allegiance between 92 and 2012. So this is pre-Hillary, pre-Trump. If a state's red, it's become more Republican. If a state is blue, it has become more Democratic. The darker the state is, the more pronounced the shift. And what I want you to look at on this map is the upper Midwest. And what you see here is that all of these states, except for Ohio, have become more Republican even before Trump came along. And Trump is disproportionately popular in this part of the country. The Hillary campaign doesn't seem to understand this. They assume that these states, plus Pennsylvania, are going to remain loyal to the Democrats because all of these states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa, Iowa is one exception, but Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania had voted Democratic in every election between 1992 and 2012. Iowa had voted Democratic in every election but one, 2004. So the assumption is these states are going to be reliably Democratic states. We don't need to spend a lot of time there. Hillary winds up not campaigning at all in Wisconsin, which turned out to be a terrible mistake. So that was her first problem. She tries to compensate for this by using the opposition of other Republicans to Trump, as in this ad.
I'm Hillary Clinton, and I approve this message.
He's a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot.
Donald Trump is a phony, a fraud.
He's not a serious adult.
I can't vote for Donald Trump given the things that he said.
Trump should not be supported.
I believe he's disqualified himself to be president.
I just cannot support Donald Trump.
These ads, though, don't seem to have the effect that Hillary thought. What Hillary, the Clinton campaign seemed to think these ads would show that Trump is he's unqualified, he's untrustworthy. Instead, the impression that they create is that Trump is someone who can stand up to politicians in both parties and force them to work hard, which turns out not to be the case. Hillary is badly hurt by the fact that she is basically as unpopular as Trump is. Red is Trump, blue is Hillary. And among voters who don't like either Hillary or Trump, Trump carries those voters by around a 3-to-1 margin, and that's going to be critical for his win. And then late in the campaign, Hillary has this jolt. New York Times coverage, when FBI Director Jim Comey announces that he is reopening the inquiry into Hillary's emails. Hillary, as Secretary of State, had violated department protocol and had done all of her emailing on her personal phone, basically to avoid State Department record keeping, make it harder for people to file Freedom of Information Act requests. This was a security issue because it's more likely that foreigners, the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, any U.S. foreign rival might be able to hack into Hillary's private phone as opposed to a secure phone put together by the NSA or the CIA. But in the summer, the decision is made that she will not be prosecuted, and then just before the election, Anthony Weiner, major impact, is arrested for sexting with a 15-year-old girl. After his arrest, the FBI seizes his laptop. What they discover is that there are thousands of emails from Hillary on the laptop. Weiner was married to a close aide of Hillary named Huma Abedin, and that it wasn't clear whether these were emails that the FBI had ever seen before. It turns out the FBI had seen just about all of these emails because Hillary had this crazy practice of emailing Abedin, her aide, telling her to print out the emails, and then Hillary would read the emails as the printout. So these were emails that the FBI already had looked at, but they didn't know that at the time. And this revelation in polls costs Hillary between 3 and 4 points, and that ultimately proves to be decisive. The final map from 2016. Trump carries all of the states in red. Hillary carries all of the states in blue. The key issue in the campaign is that Trump picks up 6 states that Barack Obama had won in both elections. Iowa was not a surprise. He was well ahead in Iowa for most of the campaign. Ohio was not a surprise. He was well ahead there. Florida, the polls were 50-50 right up till election day, but the Hillary campaign thought they had a chance of winning there. What is a surprise is Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, states again that had not gone Republican for president since 1988, a long time for passage. In the case of Pennsylvania and Michigan, 1984 in the case of Wisconsin. It's been a very reliably Democratic state. And what wins it for Trump? What wins it are white working class voters who shift heavily from the Democrats towards Trump. They like his rhetoric on trade. They like his rhetoric on immigration. They like this idea of, kind of American nationalism, and they don't like Hillary. And ultimately, that gives us the Trump win. So that's about it for the snippets for this week. We'll be hearing about Trump policy issues in the presentations. In the meantime, I hope everyone is well and is staying safe, and I will talk to you soon. Okay.